What we have here is an old Fairground bingo shutter board. It would have been illuminated in the Fairground, so if I put a light underneath there you can sort of see how it looks with a light behind illuminating it. And you can see it's incredibly dirty, it's very old. It would have been in a case, so it would have actually been fixed in, and you can see here where the sun's damaged this sort of colour here, but this bit has been protected where it's been in there, and it would have been held in place. Because it's been taken out, it's got two screws and two bolts here which hold the whole thing together, but at the edges it's peeling apart, which means the sliders don't work properly, and as you can sort of see, it's incredibly dirty. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it apart, we're going to clean it all, dry it all, put it back together, and also put some new bolts in so it's fixed and useful for the future going forward. So we'll take it apart. There's only two bolts holding this together, so we'll just get in there. We should be able to just take that apart by hand. Pull that out. We're going to keep that for later. Put that to one side so we keep it. We'll reuse those bolts. Yeah, we'll take this one off. So now we can take it apart. So lift this off. You can see how dirty these bits are. It's probably never been cleaned, and if you look at how much dirt is under here. So these old sliders all look in really good condition, they're just dirty. I'm going to put all of these in some water here, and we'll clean those off first. You can see here how much dust and how much grime is on. We'll just put that to one side while we just clean these up. Doesn't take, these actually don't take much cleaning. And then once we're ready, we'll get some blue cloth and just clean, dry these off and clean them up, make sure we get them all nice and clean. We'll do that for the rest of them. We can use a sponge if that's easier. I've just got a scouring sponge here. And just dry each one off. They're just a little bit dirty, but they clean up really well, and they're in really good condition actually, so they're not too bad. There is a little bit of dirt still on that one. Let's get that sponge. You got to imagine that they're often used in bingo clubs or in fairgrounds, so they do, you know, get a lot of abuse over the years of the sort of being in use. These are probably from somewhere like the 1970s, and they're actually made by Thomas Automatics, who were a big bingo company based in Leicester, I think. So there's 25 of these little shutter boards. Occasionally you get them broken, and we do have a few spares, so we tend to, if I find a broken one, then we'll replace it with a sort of like an old unbroken one. Some new blue cloth. Just really handy to have a big roll of this blue paper towel stuff. It works really well, keeping everything nice and dry. We want it all dry to be put back together, because any moisture in there, it can just sort of clog it up a little bit more and make the work enough. So once we've got these clean and dried, then we'll go onto the board per se, and we'll clean all that up. And it was one of those sort of things with this, is that, you know, do you want to actually clean it totally and, you know, make it absolutely brand spanking new, or just want to, you know, it has been used, it has been, you know, it has got sort of wear on there. People who use sellotape to try and keep it all together, and so we'll clean it up as much as we can, but we'll leave a little bit of the originality to it, so you still have that. Get a bit more blue cloth. And then we'll go on to, there's a few more left now. Not just to do now. And these boards were designed to be illuminated from the back, and typically what you would find if you went into a place that did bingo, you would sit at a table, you'd put your money in the slot, and that would illuminate the board so that the people knew that you'd actually paid your money for that given bingo. Right, so we've tried all those now, so just move those to the side so we can use them later. Move it out of the way and dry the board and clear all the rubbish off that's getting lot of detritus on there. Get rid of the water. Right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to this, and you can sort of see here, I just start to wipe that, you can see how much dirt is coming off there, how much dirt is coming off altogether. That's just incredibly dirty, and often what happens is, we get a bowl now, so I'm going to take this apart fully. We've got the outer casing, we've got a sheet of acrylic, got the numbers printed on a plastic sheet, and then we've got another piece of acrylic with 3 strips or four colour strips attached. We'll try and keep all that together so we don't have to put it all together. So let's just start to clean this. I'm going to use a sponge, and I might even use a magic sponge just to get a little bit more of the dirt off. We want to get this as clean as possible, really. Get all those years of grime off. Often as well, if these are used in bingo clubs, people be drinking, be smoking, so you might have, in the olden days when you could smoke in public buildings, they would get a lot of abuse, so you often get them quite well. Right, we've got a little bit of stuff on there now. I've got a magic sponge. We'll just wet that, and this really takes a lot of the grime off. This will lift. It's quite abrasive actually, so you've got to be very careful. We don't want to be too abrasive that we destroy a little bit of the thing. We just want it nicely cleaned up. And there's dirty bits. plastic sponges tend not to last very long. They're quite brittle and break down very quickly, but they are very good at getting rid of very stubborn bits of dirt on there. That's cleaning up really nicely now. Might be difficult to see, but yeah. And you can still see that it is sort of like bleach damaged. You know, we've been out and exposed to smoke and being exposed to sunlight, that bit of plastic for a very long time. And get the cracks done down here. So that is about probably as good as we can get it. Just a couple of bits there that could probably do with doing it. Again, I can dry it off, and if I'm not happy with bits, we can still go over that. See if we can just clean it up a little bit more. I'm going to get that sponge just in there. Up in there. Right, I think that will do. So what we'll do with that is we will now dry it with a bit of a blue cloth. Again, it's important to get it totally dry as much as you can. Well, totally dry actually, as much as you can, really. It needs to be dry, but it often takes a little bit of time just to do that. So we can put that to inside a bit more cloth. You do go through quite a lot of the cloth, but it is very cheap for this type of stuff. It's standard stuff using it. Right, so that is that one as clean as we can and nice and dry. It'll dry a little bit more. We'll leave it on the rack for a little while. So now we've got so this is what the sliders actually sit on underneath the sort of plastic, so they're not sliding on the numbers. And we'll just clean this up. You can see there's a little bit of wear. I don't know whether you can see that, but there is a little few lines where it's worn. People have used it and it's worn. And we don't want to damage this in at all. We just want to sort of clean it as much as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect clean. Some of the sellotape marks will leave on. It's quite abrasive quite difficult to get that off without being abrasive. There are some solvents you can use that can do on there, but they stink to high heaven, so we tend not to use them. We've occasionally used them on some things that have needed it, but you need to do that outside. And again, if this was cracked or damaged, then we could just replace it. And these, it's very cheap to get new sheets cut. So I think that's looking quite nice. There's a little bit of dirt on there. We'll get that off. There's a little bit of dirt down the edges and things, so we can get all that off. And again, we'll dry it with some blue cloth. So the numbers are printed on a plastic sheet. You can sort of see there. You can hear the sort of sound there. We just want to very gently clean this. We also don't want to, if we twist it or crease it, then it changes. It actually changes the thing a little bit. So all we're going to do is we're just going to use this sponge a little bit and clean it, and then to dry it, I'm going to actually flatten it out on a flat surface and just dry it quite flat. That will do for that. So we don't want to rub any of the numbers off. We want to keep that. We just want to get it sort of nice and clean. Let's just get that down there. So I'm going to move the bowl out of the way and we'll dry it flat. So again, it's nice and dry. We'll put that to one side for when we start to put the board back together. So now this is the backboard. So this would have, you can see on here there's been a lot of sellotape added over the years just to try and keep it all together. And then you've got these stuck on. Now what I want to do is I want to clean it as gently as I can. We will get a little bit of moisture under these, but we'll dry that off so there isn't any sort of moisture. But what I'd really like to do is, rather than peeling these off and then having to stick them back down, is just to keep them on. So we'll clean that. I get the bowl back. Right, one of them's come off, but we can stick that back on. But I'll try and keep the other ones on. I mean, you can take them off. It doesn't take much to put them back on, but I always really sort of trying to minimise the amount of work we've got to do here. Typically when I buy these, we buy in bulk, so we won't just get one. You know, we might get 10 or 15 or 20 or sometimes even more. When you're talking about 20 of one particular type of one, there's a lot of work to clean them all up and get them into a useful state again so that they can be used. Now again, I'm just cleaning these off a little bit, but I'm not going to be so aggressive to take it all off completely. I'm going to leave a little bit of it on. I just want to clean it off a little bit just to tidy it up. You see my magic sponge is very quickly deteriorating. They don't last long. Maybe 4 or 5 boards out of each one. That takes that off quite nicely. These boards have had a life, and we want to, when we're putting them back together and fixing them up a little bit like this and making them useful again, we want to, you still want to know that they've had that life really, and that they have been used. And so we won't clean it off entirely, but we'll just tidy it up as much as we can, and yeah, we will do that. Then I've got the yellow one off as well, which is a bit of a shame. Just leave that in there. Right, so what I'm going to do now is move this to the side, and then we'll dry this board again with some cloth. There's some old bits of sellotape that were actually on it. Yeah, there's that as well. So it's just about dry on the board itself. I've got the blue off as well, so we're going to have to be careful putting these back. And as we've got more of these, what I'll do is I'll get another one as an example, just to when we're putting it back. I do try and keep them on. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe we should just take them off and then just re-put them back on. Just help get that dry as well. So that's just about dry. Under there it needs a little bit more work. Fantastic. And typically you don't have to do these things immediately. You can actually dry them, wash them, Dry as much as you can and just leave them to air. Get the other two colours there. Try these off as well. Stick to my board. A bit more blue. This sounds red. Once that's all done and dry, put that to the side. Okay, so now what we need to do is work on putting it all back together, and one of the issues is because there's only bolts in the middle, that on the edges it comes apart, and when it comes apart the little sliders move out of the little grooves, twist, and then you can't really use it particularly well. So what we're going to do to fix that is we're actually going to drill some holes to add some more bolts. So I've got a bit of wood here. I will get my drill, and this is, and I'm just going to drill into the thickest part of the plastic, which is just down here in the middle of it. And if you can see that, I'm going to just drill down there. So we've got one hole there. I'll put another hole on this side. And we'll do the same at the other two sides. That. So now we've got a hole in each corner, and what that'll do is we can put a bolt in those corners and it'll bolt everything together. We still need to drill holes in the other bits though, so we'll move that to the side and just close that off. It's important to know which side is the bottom bit, and actually the beauty about this these is it's got Supply by Thomas automatics on the bottom. So that is, and then we can, what we can do is, I'm going to do it this way around, we can just prop that up and I can start to put the sliders back in. So the sliders work in these grooves. If I move that down a bit, and you can sort of see that when that's it covered, and that'll be other number uncovered, and they just slide back and forward. So we'll just put all those back in. It's still a little bit wet, we'll dry that. And I put the board up there just really to keep them in place. Put it on an angle so it just makes sure they're slid down to one specific part. So they're all in place. Now what we're going to do is put the acrylic on top, and there's two sides to the acrylic, and it should be worn on one side where the sliders have been used. It's worn on that side, and actually for a change it's worn on this side. So at some point somebody's actually probably had this apart, put it back together, but put it back together the wrong way around, and the holes line up. That's what keeps all that in place. So now what we need to do is just set that aside and then work on the board, the backboard, with the coloured gels. So the gels go on red, yellow, blue in the centre, and the blue wants to be right on the holes there. You can see those holes, they might actually go the other way around. Probably does go that way around actually. And to hold it in place I've got some double-sided tape, so we're just going to tape the top edge of these down. Put the tape on there. On there. Let's do that. Tip on the, now peel these back, and I'll start with the blue because that makes life a little bit easier if you start with the blue. Just peel this off if we can get it. So we have to make sure that those holes line up. So that's where the bolts are. Up nicely there. Get the up again, and the same with the yellow. Try and keep them as straight as possible. Unfortunately on my cutting board I've actually got the grid so I can actually see to keep it straight, and then the red goes here. Okay, so that is the colour gels back on. Right, let's all start to put this back. So we've got our board back. Let's down there like that, a bit more central. And the tricky bit is actually getting this right, so putting the numbers on right. It's actually going to be upside down that way around. And again, we want to line up those holes into there, and those will keep that in place. And then we want red at that side, green at the other side, and we're just going to drop that in and fix that in there. Now that should be all in and ready to go. Now what we need to do is bolt that in place, and we've got the bolts that we used last time. This is a bit fiddly. We're going to lift up there and slot the bolts through. Just try and get that through. Do that. Sometimes it's easier to try actually get that through there. That's a bit fiddly as well. We'll just put that bolt on here. So that is, or should be, that done. And now if you sort of see here and putting it together, it's come apart slightly, so these have got jammed, have twisted and turned and are actually out of the lines. Once you get them back into the lines, I do that, we should be able to, and that one's just out a little bit, should be able to get all the back bits together. Now at some point I think somebody's actually repaired this and put it back in the wrong way around, so the colour gels are on the wrong way. That probably should be green and white and still blue, and yellow and red, sort of like there. So we could change them round, but because that is jammed up against there. You can sort of see that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it all apart and just change it round. Take these off again, see if that helps. But rather than taking it all apart and doing that in one go, just see if we can get those out and push those out. So we've now got that together, and you can sort of see it's working quite nicely, but we've got the holes in the corner. So what we're going to do is drill those holes and put bolts in there, and then that will keep it together and make it really useful sort of longer term going forward. So we'll do that now. We'll use some new bolts for these, which we've got here. I'm going to use longer bolts than are actually on. It should just bolt through. I'll have to trim the bolts down. We want to make sure it's tight, but not too tight in terms of what we don't want to happen is it to be so tight that the little shutters don't freely move. So we'll keep testing that as we do it. Another bolt here, so we'll get that. And you can sort of see these are a lot longer, but what we'll do is we'll cut them down in a minute. So we'll cut them down. You can just use it. I mean, you could use a little spanner on the back, but you don't really need to do that. You just want to make sure, keep making sure that that is working. Here's a bolt in and another nut. Turn up again, just check that again, make sure there's, yeah, it's still moving quite well. Just need one more bolt now. And if we can find the right size, there we are. Put that in. That's the nut. That's the nut. The right size. We'll take that up. Then we have from start to finish. There we are, and that's still working all right. Those are tight enough, but not overly tight that it's crushing the plastic together, so it's impeding those shutter boards. And that's very nearly finished now. We've just got a couple of finishing touches to do. So if you're wondering, for this next bit we're going to use a Dremel just to cut the lengths of those bolts down, and I am using safety goggles, and also I'm going to catch the little ends of the bolts in a bowl, because these can get very, very hot. So we'll just do this. You've got to be careful because the other ends also become extremely hot on both sides. So that is very nearly finished now. Plug it. So there is one finishing touch to do, and that is to use just some felt pads, and I'll show you one that we've got here that's pre-done, and we just put some felt pads on that just to protect it on, if you're going to use it on a table, just makes it more useful and more practical. So we'll do that next. So we have some felt pads, and I'm going to just, we want it on the edge, actually as close to the edge as we can for these. It doesn't matter if you get some little bit left. Get and then we can just fit these on, and they go over the bolts just to protect. And because we've cut them at the edge, then they don't go over the edge as well. So it's a neat little trick just to finish that off. And we'll stick that one down there. So we've got those two, and we need just two for the middle, which we'll do on here. And again, this time I want them to actually be somewhere within again, not quite in the middle of the pad, but you can sort of see there I've cut them to the edge, and then we can put them over the bolt, fix them both sides, and then we've got a nice clean. If I put my light underneath, you can see the shutters all work, they're all opening beautifully, free flowing, and it's nicely and beautifully clean. And that's how you fix one of these types of shutter boards.